I think something is shifting in the way that the Iranian regime is talking about the war. And what I mean is that, what we've been used to since before the war and in the early weeks of the war was this constant bluster about how they're going to inflict all this terrible damage on the Israelis and the Americans, and they're going to destroy Tel Aviv, and they're going to destroy the American forces, and we all kind of rolled our eyes at that, but that was the language. And now I'm going to show you a few things, a few stories, a few statements, which seem to indicate that both Hezbollah, which is the Iranian Foreign Legion, as it were, in Lebanon, and the Iranian regime itself, I think is in panic mode and preparing its people with spin, preparing them for the actual defeat in a way. You see, if you listen carefully to what they're saying, again, Hezbollah and the regime in Tehran, you see that they know they're losing, and they're trying to make everyone see the losses, which everyone sees, as victory. So again, it's not the usual bluster we saw before the war. Let's get right to the point. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem gave a speech yesterday. Now, obviously, I'm not going to play the speech. It was in Arabic. I saw a subtitled version with Hebrew subtitles in it. And I've been asked by many of you when I've played Hebrew language or foreign language videos to just go ahead and say it instead. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of quotes from Naim Qassem's speech. Now, much of the speech was a diatribe against the Lebanese government because they're negotiating with Israel. But there was a point in the speech where he talked about victory. Okay, and he even framed it by kind of admitting that everyone realizes that they're losing. So listen to this quote. Quote, "They always say to you, you keep saying you're victorious even though you're being killed." Right? Like, how can you, right? They keep saying to you that, you guys are just getting slaughtered and you're just getting hammered by the Americans and the Israelis. Why do you keep saying that you're victorious? Or in Hezbollah's example, just the Israelis. The Americans aren't fighting Hezbollah. So so you keep saying you're victorious even though you're being killed. No, my dear, no. We are victorious from now and at every moment, despite the great sacrifices. Victory is to stand firm on the battlefield. Victory is to continue confronting the enemy. Victory is to inflict pain on this enemy, and we are inflicting pain on him. See, victory in this Shiite, in this fanatical Shiite viewpoint is not defeating your enemy. It's not achieving your war aims. It's continuing to fight. It's continuing to exist. It's continuing to impose a cost. That is victory. Now, it gets even clearer in this quote from the speech. This is a great quote. Quote, "We are men of Karbala. We do not surrender in humiliation. Rather, we fight until martyrdom or victory is achieved." And again, he just said what victory is. "And this is what happened with Imam Hussein, peace be upon him. Those who were with him were martyred, and the community has been victorious from his time until now. And we are among his followers and his students." I've talked about this in other videos, but it bears repeating. The Battle of Karbala took place in the year 680. Imam Ali Hussein, the founder of Shiite Islam, was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, and he led a small group against a much larger force loyal to the Umayyad ruler Yazid. This was a battle for succession in early Islam. Now, militarily, it was not a close fight. That's important here. So the origin story of Shiite Islam involves a horrific defeat at the hands of a much more powerful force. Okay, it wasn't close at all. Hussein was killed. Hussein and his followers, they were all surrounded. They were cut off. They were ultimately all killed in the battle. Now, from a conventional perspective, obviously, they were terribly defeated. But in Shiite Islam, Karbala is the formative event. They talk about it all the time, and it's understood differently. Hussein is seen as standing for truth and justice, fighting the man. He's standing up against an illegitimate power that's way more powerful than him, and he's resisting. His death was not viewed as failure, but as a moral victory, as an act of sacrifice that gives lasting legitimacy to the cause of Shiite Islam. Okay, the community that identifies with him sees itself as continuing that struggle across time. Okay, now let's go back to what Qasim is actually saying. When he invokes Hussein and says, we are among his followers and his students, he's placing the Hezbollah fighters and all the Shiites in southern Lebanon inside that entire framework of sacrifice, endurance, right? Defining victory as survival, and as living to fight another day and inflicting some pain on the enemy, even if you're getting beaten down. Okay, so that's Naim Qasim's speech. So clearly, he even frames it by saying, well, people are saying you're getting killed. How can you call it victory? Meaning they're trying to spin what's obvious to everyone as a humiliating defeat. They're trying to spin it as victory. And now let's take a look at Iranian state media, okay? Because we're seeing a similar type of messaging, if I may, in the Iranian state media. So let me just get to it. Here we are. Okay, here's Iranian state media, Tasnim, the IRGC media. And look at what they are saying here. Okay, so first of all, on the front page, I wanted to show you the front page before going to the articles I'm going to show you, because on the front page of Tasnim, this is the top story: naval blockade will trigger retaliation. So there's a warning there. It's not like the U.S. cares about their retaliation. Iran asserts right to continue uranium enrichment. But look over on the side. Most visited. These are the top stories, okay, today, the most popular stories. Now, are they actually the most visited? This is IRGC regime media. Look at this second story. Spokesman lauds servicemen who lost hands in defense of homeland in U.S.-Israeli war in Iran. Now, remember, there has not been any ground invasion at all. There's been no hand-to-hand combat of any sort, or direct combat. Like there's no one's attacking people on the ground. And I guess if he's part of the besieged and the Israelis are carrying out airstrikes, it's a very strange story. And again, every story in here is planted. Some of them deal with the actual headlines, like these top stories on the side here. But what is this story about? So this is a very weird story. Okay, again, spokesman lauds servicemen who lost hands in defense of homeland in U.S.-Israeli war. Check this out. The spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry paid tribute to a young Iranian soldier for displaying courage and patriotism after he lost both his hands while defending the homeland during the recent U.S.-Israeli war of aggression. Quote, "Homeland for Iranians is something far beyond a mere attachment to land and soil. It is a legacy as ancient as a civilization, stretching back thousands of years, passed down from ancestors to their descendants. It is precisely this civilizational quality that imbued with a spiritual essence that has caused all aggressors to ultimately regret their savage acts." Spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Minister, Esmail Bakai, said in a post on his X account on Tuesday, "This is how Iran has endured throughout history, and this is how it will continue to endure proudly," he added. Bakai also attached a photo of the selfless serviceman saying, quote, "A brave young soldier who lost his hands while defending his country before he could even hold his newborn baby in his arms." It's a very bizarre story. It's not about someone who was killed, and there hasn't been a ground invasion. And there's no context given other than we have this guy who lost his hands and he was being praised by the spokesman of the foreign ministry. So what are they doing here? Okay, one of the great things, as I've always said about regime media, is that it's not free press. Everything is planted and carefully chosen for messaging purposes. So what exactly are they doing? So, right, okay. So let's go back to Karbala, because this relates to Karbala as well. At the Karbala battle back in 680, Abbas ibn Ali, who was Imam Hussein's half-brother, is one of the central heroes of Karbala. Okay, according to the Shiite tradition, he was sent to bring water to the camp. And in the process, both of his arms were cut off in the battle. And then he continued forward without arms until he was killed. So in Shiite memory, that detail is not incidental. Okay, it's emphasized, it's remembered, it's reenacted in rituals. It represents loyalty under extreme loss, continuing, persevering, even after being physically mutilated. You've lost your hands, you've lost your arms. And that's part of the cultural resonance, the emotional, spiritual resonance of Karbala. Okay, now obviously it's a devastating injury. It's a sign of the cost of war, but that's not what it means to the people, to the Shiites who are reading this news item, right? It's a symbol. It's a man who loses his hands in battle and is still held up as a hero. Okay, this is, again, it's evoking one of the most powerful images of Karbala. I cannot stress enough that mentioning Karbala like Naim Qassem did, or the regime does, or when we did a video about the 40 days after Ali Khamenei and why the 40 days is so important. And you'll see, and I said it at the time, I predicted it, but you already start seeing it. The regime, when they talk about the fighting, continue in story after story talking about how it lasted 40 days. These are all resonance from the cultural memory of Shiites. And in this part of the world, in the Middle East, with groups like this, history is not ancient history. History is the template that you're living every single day. Okay, so in this news story, they don't have to state the parallel explicitly because it's a Shiite audience. It's immediately recognizable. Now you might wonder why it's in English. Tasnim just translates all their stories into English. But the message here is very clear. The physical loss, even extreme loss, does not negate victory. Remember what Naim Qassem said about victory. It can actually reinforce victory. Okay, so what are they doing? They're shaping how the public interprets the events. They're taking real losses. They're taking casualties. There's tons of destruction. They're inflicting almost no damage on the Americans, and I mean, relative to what they're experiencing on the Israelis either. And it's placing all of this destruction and humiliation into a narrative in which those losses are not actually defeat, right? And that's when I said at the beginning of this video that this is a change in the messaging. At the beginning of the war, it was more like denying that anything bad was happening to them and just saying, we're going to inflict unbelievable damage. We're going to destroy America. We're going to destroy Israel. Now they've shifted. Now it's, we know about all the damage, but the damage is actually not a humiliation at all. It's actually victory. It's actually heroism. It actually fits right into our tradition of heroism, right? Because they understand that they're losing. So they're working really hard to make sure that the population, that the public interprets it properly. So they're redefining the terms. So survival is victory. Continuing to fight is victory. Suffering, even severely, is but if you remain committed, you've still won. And this brings me to one more news item that I think also sort of fits into this. Before we get to that, please make sure to click the link in the description of this video to subscribe to Israel 365 News and Israel 365 Action. Israel 365 News is a daily news update, a short newsletter with headlines of some analytical pieces and some headlines from Israel that you're not going to get in mainstream media, both in terms of the specific news items that you're going to get and also in terms of the type of analysis and type of perspective that we bring. Israel 365 News daily newsletter. In this day and age, you cannot rely on good, accurate information from Israel coming to you organically, because you're just not going to get it if you're just scrolling through X. You have to seek it out. And at Israel 365 News, this is news from Israel with a biblical perspective. So Israel 365 newsletter, and then Israel 365 Action weekly newsletter, which will keep you up to date on all of the different issues that we are pursuing and give you action items, and also give you information about upcoming webinars and other goings on with Israel 365 Action. Okay, look at this item in Tasnim also. This is, I think, like on the main page, I think it's like the third story. Yeah, here it is. It's right here, third story. Israel has not abandoned Lebanon, spokesman. I love this. You have a headline of saying, we haven't abandoned Lebanon. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you they've abandoned Lebanon, because the problem is that Iran is going into this like ceasefire with the Americans, this supposed ceasefire. I made another video about that. It's not really a ceasefire, but they're going into this ceasefire with the Americans, into these negotiations. And meanwhile, Israel's just pummeling Hezbollah. And Iran, the Iranian regime, claimed at the beginning of the ceasefire that it included Israel stopping to attack Lebanon. The Americans said, no, it doesn't. And Israel just has continued going about its merry way, degrading Hezbollah in Lebanon. And meanwhile, the Lebanese government has started negotiating with Israel about the disarming and removal of Hezbollah. And Naim Qassem gives this speech because they're panicking about that. So they have to save face and say, Iran has not abandoned Lebanon. Let's read this story. A spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Ismail Bakai, dismissed claims that Iran has abandoned Lebanon during the recent Pakistani-mediated talks with the U.S. and Islamabad. In comments at a weekly presser on Wednesday, Bakai said Iran has always praised the legitimate resistance of the people of Lebanon. The people of Lebanon. Hezbollah is Iranian. Anyway, and other elements of the resistance, and has constantly stood by them. He noted that a ceasefire in Lebanon was raised as one element of the recent negotiations in Islamabad, adding that the other side's backtracking does not mean Iran has withdrawn from its commitments. The spokesman noted that Iran's support for Lebanon was pursued in Islamabad and will continue to be pursued. They said, we want a ceasefire in Lebanon. The Americans said no. The Israelis said no. And then what did they do in response? Nothing. Okay, but they say that they're going to continue to pursue it. We haven't deserted you. Don't worry. We're going to keep asking for a ceasefire in Lebanon. And that assertions that Iran has abandoned Lebanon are entirely incorrect. Regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, he said that Pakistani side had said explicitly that a ceasefire was part of the negotiations and that no excuse or justification for failing to implement it would be acceptable. On the reports that the United States and the Zionist regime are playing good cop, bad cop, Bakai said that neither is acting as a policeman and that both are criminals. He also maintained that the international focus on Iran's nuclear program had been the product of a deceitful media operation. But the headline on this, Iran has not abandoned Lebanon. I don't think there's greater evidence that they know that they actually have abandoned Lebanon. Let's put it that way. So the upshot of all of this, of all of the stories that I shared with you, Naim Qassem's speech and the story about the guy with the missing the hands, is that they're being humiliated, they're being destroyed, they're losing badly. Hezbollah, they couldn't even get a ceasefire in Lebanon. They couldn't even get the Americans to get the Israelis to stop attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. They couldn't even get that. And they're just being humiliated all over the place. So they're spinning, both Hezbollah itself and Iran are spinning everything that's happening to try to maintain a veneer, an image that they're still being victorious. I don't know what works on their Shiite population and what doesn't. But when we look ahead to what's coming next, where Trump is really working to get all of his demands met. He wants capitulation. He wants surrender. And it's going to be very interesting to see what that might look like and what spin he will allow and what spin the situation will allow. But I think is panicking. Again, they've pivoted away from tough talk about how they're going to destroy everybody to repackaging their defeats to convince everyone that they haven't abandoned Lebanon, and really, and really, even if they're getting beaten down, it's heroic and it's still a type of victory. So I think the end might be near for the regime in Tehran. God bless.